Okay, Chapter 32, Section 2, Hantavirus and hantavirus syndromes. The hantaviruses cause two main diseases in us humans. The pulmonary syndrome, hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, HPS, pulmonary meaning lungs, so you're going to have some killer pneumonia, a bleeding killer pneumonia, we'll talk more about that soon, and a hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome. Hemorrhagic, meaning you're going to have some bleeding issues. You're going to be bleeding in some weird places. Both syndromes are caused by hantavirus-infected rodents. Excuse me. Turns out the rodents are the natural reservoir. They're the carriers for hantavirus. They pass the virus out in their urine. Turns out rodents, mice, rats, whatever, do not have bladder control. So they're constantly dribbling, dribble, as they're walking, running, whatever. And if I remember correctly, in the areas that you see it here in the US, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, basically the American Southwest, one of the primary rodent, the mouse reservoir, was a mouse that they were able to find in most of the people who got sick in their houses. Turns out mice are going to get into the kitchen because that's where the food is. They're going to crawl through the cabinets, this, that, or the other. And supposedly for what they found, I can't remember if it was all or just one person's, kitchen, and they just assumed it was in most, is that the mice were scurrying through the drawers looking for food and basically walked across the cutlery, the knives, the forks, whatever, and left traces of urine on there. And that's where the virus is. You go, you eat, and then after you've washed your utensils and put them in the drawer, you generally don't wash them again before use. So you've ingested the hantavirus. Got its name, hantavirus, because we first isolated it from the Hantan region of Korea. That's where we first recognized this class of viruses. Now, it's not to say that the viruses we have here in the American Southwest are the same viruses that are in Korea. No, they're just closely related based on, DNA sequences and things like that. Here in the South, in the U.S., like I said, it's going to be the Southwest. There's been, in 2012 and back in 1993, there were some outbreaks. Remember, outbreaks means that there's maybe some low-level numbers of the disease. Outbreak means that suddenly it's just a lot more, but it's contained in a region. If it becomes a lot more and it spreads to more regions, that's an epidemic. If it spreads across national lines, then you have a pandemic. Symptoms generally in pathology, well, starts with the virus itself, okay? The virus is an enveloped RNA virus. So it's an envelope, one gets in, hundreds, thousands come out, and along the way they're stripping off the cytoplasmic membranes. So they're going to kill the host cell. Negative RNA, negative sense single-stranded RNA, similar to the rabies from the first lecture of this chapter. It is related to the hemorrhagic fevers that are known as Lassa and Ebola. Ebola, Africa, Lassa, Africa, and I think in Southeast Asia in some places. Don't quote me on that part. What you see, the symptoms. Sudden onset, so it's an acute fever. It's not this slow progression like if you get the flu, you feel it for days. Nah, you get it usually like a day, maybe two. Early onset, notice that it's coming and it hits hard. Myalgia, basically, you just feel weird. That's when the aches, the pains, things like that. Thrombocytopenia, basically your platelets and stuff, you'll start to break down in your blood. So you have trouble clotting. Leukocytosis, your white blood cells, your leukocytes, start lysing because of the virus. Pulmonary capillary leakage. It sounds exactly what I was. Remember I said pulmonary, lungs, the capillaries, capillary beds in your lungs start to leak. So you start to leak fluid, plasma, and then if it's bad enough, you just basically bleed into your lungs. The HPS, Hunter pulmonary syndrome, has about a 40% mortality rate. The one that has the renal syndrome, that you have, that is much lower, only a 1 to 15% mortality rate. Now you look here, you can see in the scanning electron in this tissue sample that the viruses are going to be associated with some of your white blood cells. Here, macrophages are engulfing, and the dark stained regions within the cell, that's where you have clumps of the virus after they're being manufactured. They're taking over the white blood cells. Because of, how easily we think this one's communicated, animal to animal and whatnot, we take immediate BSL for safety precautions. So if you think somebody's been exposed or animals in their house have been exposed, they immediately shut everything off, close it off. If it's a person, we immediately isolate them. And BSL-4, remember, this is where you see the pictures in the movies and stuff, where basically they're wearing, the air suits, covered head to toe, positive pressure, air that's filtered, so that way nothing leaks in, everything's pushed out. So it's almost a spacesuit. Like I said, mice, the big carriers in Southwest, but rats, voles, and some places lemmings can also be the reservoirs. About 200,000 cases recognized annually. We've been able to reduce the number down to this because we limit mouse habitats. We try to minimize, letting mice into our houses. Up until a few, mid 20th century, this really wasn't something that they could do. Living out in Southwest in certain places, having mice coming up into the house was just part of, just normal life. Now we're doing what we can to keep the little buggers out. Like I said, the mice are spreading it, urine in the feces, if they urinate on the feces, all of that dries up in the drawer. You're moving stuff around, you're breathing in dust, you're eating on the utensils. Well, you go to pick up the utensils, you're stirring up the dust that is the dried up urine, the desiccated rodent feces. So you ingest it, which doesn't cause you the disease that way, but the fact that you have and you're waving the stuff around near your face means you're inhaling whatever was on it.